Hi,
Morning.
how are you?
Eh, yeah.
Um,
It's a way to start, eh?
yeah, I'm trying to
Very
decide.
motivating.
I want to answer a question. I got one from last week. After we did our nutrition thing that I want to touch on quick because it was too complex to answer well in a written form. So, last week we did the whole nutrition thing. Just talk about like some concepts, philosophies, whatever. And one of the questions I got was, my kid's super busy doing all kinds of shit, like ice workout, back to backs, 2 a days, whatever. What should they be focused on? What should they be from a nutrition standpoint? And my thing again always with kids is like they can get away with so much, so it's not the most important thing ever. But as a guideline, I always talk about like moderate protein, moderate carbs. Like those are your two: protein repairs, carbs refuel. So focusing on those things around performance, particularly even outside performance, is good. But kind of a rule of thumb too is like I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I like the way this nutritionist that was talking was explaining it for youth. She's saying like protein builds, carbs fuel, and fats protect. So those are kind of three ways you can think about the macronutrients. But generally speaking, around performance is protein carb focus. So between games, between workouts, between whatever, that's your goal. Focus on those two things. Make sure that they're getting something that has those two things. And then from a hydration standpoint, it's mostly just water. So unless you have a kid that's super, super sweaty or they're sweating a ton, then you might want to look at an electrolyte kind of beverage. But the most important thing, because he was specifically asking me about some of these, like whatever, BioSteel and some of the other sport drink things. And I was just saying to him, like, the most important from the hydration, like electrolyte standpoint, is salt. Like when you sweat, the thing you sweat out most is salt. So that's sodium. The second is potassium, and the rest of the electrolytes not so much in your sweat. So you want something that replaces salt more than anything else. And this is why if you look at like Prime or Body Armor or whatever, they have warning labels for kids under 14 because the main electrolyte they replace is actually potassium, and it's not a good source of sodium. So I think like I remember reading like a Prime label the other day. It was like 700 milligrams of potassium um, per bottle, and so which is a ton. So that's why they have a warning label about that for kids, and that's not the primary electrolyte you want to replace anyways. It's sodium. So um, look for things that are more skewed towards sodium if you're going to do an electrolyte thing because they're super sweaty. But if they're not super sweaty, you don't necessarily need that. Like just water's fine. But if you're going to add an electrolyte, just make sure it's more of a sodium thing. And they need carbs for fuel, and they need protein. So the last thing I want to say about that before we go on is, especially for parents, I don't know if I mentioned it last week or not, but your goals as a parent, if you're focused on whatever your nutrition strategy is, weight loss, whatever, is not the same as the goals for an athlete. So if you start to bleed your focus into what your kids are doing, so the sugar is bad, the low carb, the whatever diet thing you're focused on as an adult that's trying to do more weight management, that's not the same focus as a kid that is supposed to be a more high performing athlete, right? And kid goes from whatever, let's say 8 when they're old enough to pay attention to what you're saying to 23 or older if you're then into the pros, like playing as a professional athlete. It's just fundamentally not the same focus from a nutrition standpoint. So be careful that you're not um, trying to enforce your weight management strategy of nutrition on their performance nutrition strategy. So that's a thing to be cautious of, because for some people listening to me, it might be that's what they think when I'm talking about they need the sugar, they need the carbs, and they're just like, well, that's not good. Like that's not what they should be having all the time or whatever. And it's not about it being all the time, but it's just they need something that you don't necessarily need so much in your role as parent. So just be cautious of that, where you don't get your nutrition philosophy and your goals from a nutrition standpoint and project them onto your kid who has a different set of outcomes that they're looking for from
Yeah.
a performance
You
standpoint.
put a kid on a low carb diet that's a very active kid, then you're gonna wonder why he's half asleep all the time. So that's the difference, right? You're burning calories, and you got to look at the volume. you know, the volume of food and stuff that you're eating, like your kids should out eat you by about 3 times, right? Because they have to feel like it's almost like you can't eat too much when you're very active. I mean, I'm throwing that out there kind of stupidly, but um, yeah. So you can't like you can't let them overeat like idiots, but they're going to eat more. They should because they're probably burning. You know, I don't know what a typical adult would burn in a day, but I know what I do with workouts, with a little bit of skating, and being, let's say, on a fairly active day, like just moving around a lot. Like I burn a decent amount, but it's not close to what my kids burn, right? So I gotta. That's the difference, right? So I don't need as many carbohydrates as he does. Um, Mine's more protein.
Yeah,
You know,
and there's a difference. That's important to just keep in mind from that perspective too. I think I heard the other day too, the for carbs anywhere from 3 to 8 grams per kilogram um, of body weight for athletes. So you can be up to like almost 700 grams of carbohydrates for a more adult. So someone around my size, easily close to 700 carbohydrates a day and 700 grams of carbs a day, which is a ton, man. It's crazy. So for anyone that's in the average person with if you have an office job or you're relatively sedentary or whatever, that's you don't need that much, right? But it's a just different goal set. It's a different mindset. So that's the thing. Just to answer that question quick, is just that hydration piece. Just be cautious of the electrolyte stuff. Make sure that it's primarily sodium, and there isn't even a recommended amount because the amount you sweat out is different. Like some kids are really salty sweaters, some people aren't. Like so, there's not even a necessarily an amount of sodium they need to replace that I can give, but that's the primary electrolyte you're trying to replace. So if you're drinking things that aren't replacing that, then there's no point of drinking that thing.
then you're
You know,
over.
yeah, and overdoing it.
The water's actually not doing it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So and then you get things like I said, like the primes or whatever, and it's too concentrated in something that you don't necessarily need to replace that much of. So you're getting a concentrated blast of potassium. It's like that's not actually what you need to be doing. And then your body has to work on diluting that. Right. So, anyways, point being, the hydration piece, good. Um, Water is the most important. And then if they need some salts, look for like a more salt based, sodium based electrolyte mix. That's why I like BioSteel. That's why I used it before we even started working with them because guys actually use it because it's a more balanced electrolyte profile.
It's really good.
Yeah, and then
it tastes great.
Yeah, it does. And then the nutrition standpoint, it's protein carb moderate. So this episode of the podcast is brought to you by the PowerTech online membership program. If you've been listening to Andy and I wondering, hey, how are they able to get all this podcast content out there? Well, that's because of our members. For just $9.99 a month, you can get access to our online video library, including hundreds of videos of Coach Andy teaching, and have the option for consultation calls with Andy or myself to go over anything you need. We can cover training, nutrition, coaching, parenting, agents, the junior college hockey path, whatever's of interest to you. You'll also be able to participate in our popular Ask Me Anything episodes, have access to special discount codes, and be given priority for any PowerTech in-person camps or events. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, this is the best way to do it. Visit powertechhockey.ca/memberships or find the link in the description of this video to learn more. So I was at the Hockey Canada coaching certification thing, HP1 on the weekend, which was interesting. I probably saw like maybe 10 or 15 coaches that came up to me to talk about the podcast, which was kind of cool. So that was kind of nice getting to meet and talk to some of the actual coaches that are doing some stuff. A lot of former players, former high level players that were there, which was interesting. Mikhail Grabovski was one of the guys there, which is cool. So a lot of guys, just like hockey guys that were there, which was interesting. I've never been to something like that before, so that was kind of my first taste of it. But we had a bunch, basically the format of the weekend, we had a bunch of different presentations on different topics, whatever. And then we had our little coach side groups where we talk about whatever the thing was that we're talking about. But we had one that I thought was interesting, and I'm going to use it for the rest of the talk today. They were talking about qualities of coaches. So they had 5 different characteristics of coaches or of coaching that basically everything stems from. And then they had us rank from 1 to 5 what we thought was the most important to least important from a coaching perspective.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you the words, and then I want you to rank them 1 to 5.
Okay.
So just write them down. So first one is leadership, technical and tactical knowledge.
Tech.
Yeah, tech and tactical.
knowledge,
Yeah.
yeah.
Motivation, communication.
Mode, yeah, communication,
Yep. And then what did I not give you there? Teaching? Teaching.
teaching. Isn't that not communicating?
Well, this is why I thought this was interesting. Okay, so you do so just take those, like it's not that deep, but just
Yeah,
take those, rank them 1 to 5. Just take a second and rank like
okay,
how you would order them 1 to 5. I'm gonna do the same, and then we'll
okay.
just talk about it. So I want, because I'm actually curious, because I bet you we're like almost the exact same.
We'll see.
Okay, so what was your first one?
Well, I put communication or teaching, but I know that's 2. I
We did it 1, 2,
no, I
or
did it
like
1. I
interchangeable
actually put 1 and then I put it as 4. Like, it's interchangeable.
communication and teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so for argument purposes, it's 1, 2. We'll talk about it in a second, but I
Okay.
just want to get your rank. So
Okay.
1, 2 is
Okay.
communicating, teaching.
Okay. Let's say that.
Okay, so that was the same as me.
Okay.
Okay, what was your 3?
3 would be leadership.
Same.
Really?
Yeah. What was your 4?
Technical, tactical.
Same.
Really?
And then what was the next one?
Motivation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You too.
Exact same.
That's funny.
Exact same. Okay.
It's
So
actually not that funny.
so so why makes perfect sense actually. So why okay, first of all, talk about why the confusion between communication and teaching.
Well, communication.
Because I see a clear difference between them.
Yeah,
But
like communication could be. Um, Communication could be just like, are you talking to your kids about life? Are you talking to kids about things outside of hockey?
right.
Right. Communicating a message, being clear, um, just having conversations, being approachable or not, or like whatever that means. And then teaching is actually teaching the game, like
Mhm.
being able to get a message across. Does that make
Yep.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
You?
So I'm the same. So I think that's kind of the 1, 2 for me. The reason I had first one is communicating, because I feel like the other 4 stem from communicating. So if you can't be a good communicator, then the like how can you be a good leader? How can you share the knowledge that you have? How can you teach well? How can you motivate? It's like if you're not a good communicator, you can't do those things. So I think they're all dependent on that. But that wasn't how they ranked it.
Okay. I'm really curious what they got.
So I don't remember. I'm trying to
Oh,
remember what,
was it?
because he just said it verbally. He didn't have it written on the
Would
on the
you
page.
think it's
It
technical
was
or
no, no.
or
I think
leadership?
it was something I think it was leadership and motivator,
Okay.
which I don't like.
Yeah, I know.
Which I don't
I'm
like.
the same.
Right? But so anyways, the one that I know for sure is that motivator was much higher on the list, which I didn't like that necessarily. So anyways, we'll get to that in a second. So we have communication, we have leadership. So that's why for me number 1, communication is the most important, because everything else kind of stems from that one. Teaching for me personally, and it's a little bit dependent on the level, but for the purposes of where I was, which was this Hockey Canada thing where I don't think anyone there was a pro level coach. I think all of them were high level junior down to like 14U. I think is their U14 is the first level that you need that certification to coach. So between 14 and or 13 and 25, right? So for those purposes, like for that audience, I would say that teaching is the second most important thing you're there for, right? Because it should be more of a development focus. So even if we go so far as OHL or NCAA college where you want to win, the coaches are trying to move on to be coaches, it's their full-time job, there's money involved in all of this. If they're not developing kids and sending them off to NHL camps or getting drafted or whatever, if that development piece isn't there, then they're not going to be marked as an effective coach to some degree.
Or winning.
Yeah, right. But I think that's the indicator for me for why teaching I'd have as the second. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, and that's why I interchanged them. Like, um, I'm just trying to put a sentence together here. Like, you can teach because you can teach. I think communication is more important than teaching, because teaching, you could ask me how do I what's a power play, and I could go this, and you go, okay. I've taught you that, but the ability to communicate it effectively so that you understand it, and that you can and then you know why you're doing it and what are the other things, like that's where I think communication makes you a good teacher. Not necessarily a good teacher, but makes a teacher. If you can teach something and communicate it well, then you become a good teacher. and a good communicator. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, so then the next you had as number 3 was leadership.
Yeah.
So why do you have that one as 3 and not say 1?
I would say I would say um, I would say that leadership is depends on what you consider a leader. First of all, right? Like if you have a neutered cat walk in your dressing room with no energy and just is able to communicate but is dry, it's like um, it's not probably not as effective as someone that has energy and stuff like that. So, but you could still be a leader, a quiet leader. Do you know what I mean? So, and I don't know if you need like leadership is important as a coach because like if you have some leadership, you can direct the ship a little bit. But if you have a good room, if you have you in the room, then you could take over a lot of that leadership, right? You can delegate leadership to good players as well, and which is leadership in itself, being able to delegate, right? So that's why I think um, it's good. You empower some of your players to be leaders and stuff like that too. Because if you're always looking at like if you look at let's call him what's the football guy Vince Lombardi, like he's typically called the ultimate leader. It's like it's almost could be intimidating to guys to a point. Like, well, but if you're a good leader, guys will follow. That's the point. It's not always intimidation, but I think if you have guys in the room that can lead as well, then I think your leadership qualities don't have to be as high up there.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think exactly that. But this is the problem that I have again with when we were talking about this stuff is that I feel like it all stems from communicating. Like if you're a good communicator, you're probably going to be a good leader.
100%. Yeah.
So I can't have leadership as number 1 when it's almost dependent on your ability to communicate well. You know what I mean? And I think you brought up a great point that which I actually hadn't thought of is even being able to delegate different types of leadership. So for example, if you're not like for me, I can get like fired up talking about stuff, but I'm not a super raw guy. And if some kids respond to that, you might have a raw assistant coach or the raw captain or somebody that can handle that job. So you don't need that to be an effective quality coach. I don't think. I don't think that component of it is necessarily needed, and that almost ties into the motivation piece, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think that's a good point to be highlighted is that you can delegate different components of leadership as you need as a coach. So I do think it's super important because you need your group to buy in and you need all of these things. But I don't think your primary goal or your primary job is to make sure that leadership is the most important thing beyond communicating and teaching. Because I even think of it like if I'm a young youth coach and I'm like the guy that's on for the whatever house league yellow team practice, there's not a whole lot to lead necessarily. You know, it's just we're out there having a skate. So what's my primary job is be able to explain what needs to be done and be able to teach that. If I'm not the most effective leader of all time in that context, then I don't think that that's gonna hinder your ability to do a good job.
So I've got a question for you
Yeah.
because I know guys that I've trained that played in the NHL, and I've had this in junior as well, but played in the NHL that would laugh at their coach. Do you remember? You know who I'm talking about? There's a couple. There's okay, so that's not leadership. He's a good communicator, very good communicator. Can teach the games X and O's like crazy, but they have zero respect for him. But it's their job and they have to do it, right? Like he decides who's on the first line, third line, penalty kill, power play, and stuff like that. So he would walk in the room and guys would just like make fun of him and laugh at him. And that's several guys. I mean, I've heard that, and they don't have respect for certain coaches sometimes. But it's your job; you have to do it. So is that what you call leadership, or is it that's your boss? You have to listen. Doesn't mean as a leader.
Yeah, that's a great example too. So, and I think that's a good illustration of also of that. You can still be a good coach, considered a good coach, without necessarily having to be a good leader in every context. Obviously, it's better to be a good leader. I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying when you're comparing the qualities, I think communication and teaching are first, But if you have the guy, like I said, that you're on the with the blue team and the coach wears jeans on the ice and doesn't exactly exemplify the best of leadership, if he's a good communicator and he can teach well, then he could still be an effective coach. So I think the leadership contributes to that being better, but it's not the most important necessarily. Um, so the next one was the technical and tactical knowledge. Um, for me, I think like this one, I had it down the list because, especially again in the context of the group that we were talking with, how much does it matter for your 13-year-old team or your 15-year-old team if you have like how much does it matter if you have all of the best technical and tactical knowledge and resources at your disposal? I would argue it doesn't really, because at that point you're talking mostly basics anyways. So if you don't have like expert level X's and O's and all this stuff, I don't know that that is going to hinder your ability to be a very effective coach. Would you agree? What are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I do and I don't. The thing is, with good technical and tactical awareness, you can find the most subtlest things to shut another team down, right? So if you're playing like a really good players and you're a really good coach in at the U14s or whatever, or OHL, whatever. Like, okay, here's an example: Dale Hunter for London, he finds a way to always win. It's tactical. I mean, he squeezes the juice out of the lemon, but tactical, and it's like and sometimes the tactical isn't pretty, and sometimes it is. But he finds a way. Like he has guys playing hard, guys that you wouldn't necessarily think played hard, but they played hard. So I think the tactical can, because if you're playing like that is actually a big thing in hockey. Is yes, heart will win most of the times. Heart and hard work and effort and all that kind of stuff could win many of the times. But if you work really, really hard against a team that just knows how to shut you down and everything's buttoned up really tight, then it's really, really hard, right? And they could, so a very, very well coached team can take. And the other thing about that side is that you take a very, very well coached team, and you take a player that maybe is fringe being in the league, but you could teach him a role to keep things simple and not get out of position. It helps a lot. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't dismiss the tactical stuff even at a youth age, because, well, even I did it with Charlie's young team. We had a couple face-off plays because they were, and this is my point of this is they were not a good hockey team, and I'm not being disrespectful to them. There weren't a whole bunch of good hockey players, so we had to have them buy in a little bit tactically at 9 years old, because or else it's just pond hockey. So we had some things that helped us win games. So I don't dismiss the tactical at all. But then, okay, so here's my flip side, and I can go on a couple things here. Is you look in the NHL, and John Tortorella is not a tactical guy. He's an effort guy. He wants 110% or 101 at least. He wants everything plus a little bit more every day, every drill, and I know this from friends that played with him, for him. And is he a leader? Yeah, he's a hard ass, but his technical tactical is not great, as he's got guys for that. He knows how to squeeze the lemon out of the juice, or the juice out of the lemon, right? Whereas if you flip that to Hitchcock is tactical to the like big time. Everything is X's and O's, and motivating. I don't know if that would be motivating or leadership or stuff like that. That might not be the word to use, but over X's and O's, he consults coaches on that kind of stuff. So like you could see how both win at certain times, and then you could see how both kind of you run your course with your players after a while. It's like, okay, enough. Like we can't get squeezed anymore. So you last 3, 4, 5 years with one team, and then you're gone. Or we're over tactical. Now we don't have the heart. So it's like, okay, now it changes. And then you look at another. What is Knobloch for Edmonton? That guy looks like he could do my taxes.
Yeah.
He's probably, that's what he does. He's got the haircut of an accountant or optometrist. He doesn't look like he has a heartbeat, right? He's calm, cool, collected. So I would say that he probably has some good tactical, like obviously, and he manages to squeeze guys out. So like that's why I don't like lists like this when people say here's number one, here's number two, here's number three, because it changes. You could find examples of any coach, and you can say, well, no, this guy's more of this than that,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Do my taxes.
Yeah, he looks like he'd do my taxes for sure. I'd trust him with my taxes.
But it's funny because you say it without breaking stride. You say it, didn't even bat an eye, just keep on chugging.
Yeah.
So okay, so good point. So because I'm on the same page as you, where different situations require different skill sets. So you can't say 1 to 5 or what's the most important because it always depends.
Yeah,
You know,
like
as we say.
so if you've been coaching, okay, I'm going to use in the OHL for example, Erie Otters and the Niagara Ice Dogs for a while, right? The last few years they were like Erie had some good teams until COVID, and then it just seemed like they just couldn't find their way. Now, is it a how they put the team on the ice, or is it coaching? Could be either or, but they struggled for a couple of years, right? And then all of a sudden they brought Stan Butler in, and now they've started to play differently and winning games and stuff. So it's like at any point it can change, right? So maybe it was uh, maybe he sat there, and I don't know, but maybe he sat there and says, okay, I kind of have an idea of how he played, but like they defend a lot harder. They're a little bit bigger. They're a little bit heavier on the puck on the forechecks and stuff like that. A little heavier bodies. So it's like,
Well,
who knows, right?
yeah, and so exactly what I was going to go to. So these guys, when we're talking about the list of what's better and worse, whatever, I'm trying to, if I have to pick, that's where I'm getting my order. But I definitely don't dismiss that tactical piece because I have two great examples even for myself. I had my last coach in junior. Our team was just really good. Like we were just a really good team, and then we lost in our league finals, the Sutherland Cup finals. We lost to a team we should have beat because we got out coached. From what I could from what I could see. So we came out our first two games. It was like 6-2, 6-2. We won first two games, and then they changed the style. Like they totally changed the way they were playing, and we didn't. And like we just didn't have an answer when they changed their style. And what was funny is the coach I played against that we lost to was my previous coach, and we had the exact opposite. I had the exact opposite experience with him. I started my first year in junior with that coach, last place. Very next season, we finished first place. And it was because he could read on the fly. And because I remember in real time in the games, it'd be like, we're doing this. He could see it on the bench. He would be like, okay, no, we're doing this. Like right away, change, right? Face-off plays would change right away. Structure in the neutral zone would change right away. So he could see it and make those calls right in the middle of the game, you know, which is a huge advantage if you're from a coaching perspective, because you see, oh, we planned for them to do this. They're not doing that anymore. Let's do this. Or this isn't working. Let's do this. And some coaches can't do that. So there's definitely a huge advantage to being able to do that. And same with your examples of like these NHL coaches. Some of these guys are super technical, super X's and O's, and some guys aren't. Some guys are the complete opposite, and both have a place. Both can work.
Yeah, like there's Ralph Kruger. Do you know that name? He coached in Edmonton, coached in Buffalo.
Like when? Recent?
Yeah, recently.
Was he?
And,
Oh,
and,
I
and
don't remember.
at the NHL level, it just seems like he seems like the nicest guy. Seems like the smartest guy. Seems like the tactical, everything's there. Seems like a good communicator and stuff like that. And it seems like his method doesn't work. Just seems like it doesn't work. So you know, you got to bring someone in to replace him that's almost the flip of him, like the total opposite. So that's why I don't like to rank them like this is number one, because if you got a team that is just all over the place, like it just looks like a dog's breakfast out there,
Yeah.
then you need an X's and O's guy to come in and say and switch it right up, right? Right. But then you take leadership, right? But then you take leadership, and then you know maybe it is the number one thing. Because this is what I'm saying. It could be anything, because the Vancouver Canucks were, I forget who was coaching just recently before Tocchet took over. Oh, I think was it Bruce Boudreau? Maybe.
Before Vancouver?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I think it was Boudreau before Tocchet came in. It was. I'm pretty sure. So, and apparently Bruce Boudreau is a great coach, but it wasn't going as planned or whatever. But then Rick Tocchet comes in, and what is Rick Tocchet? He's like, if you're a hockey player, there's nothing but respect there. He's a hard-nosed, good guy, blah, 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 and he take over the room and gets guys doing the way they want. And maybe it's because his leadership ability is just, he's just a leader. He walks in a room and it's like, yeah, you're listening to me, and everyone's in awe, right? You know what I mean? So it's like I don't like lists like this.
It was Bruce
Yeah,
Boudreaux, but also A Dog's Breakfast.
yeah,
Again,
no good.
like hilarious.
Really?
You don't even. It's like you don't even know you're saying it.
Ah, no.
This is why. This is
This
why I
is my
laugh.
life, though.
But this is why every second or third episode, I fall over laughing because you don't even break stride when
No,
you say it. It's the funniest thing
it's a
ever.
lot of years in the dressing room, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Dogs. I've heard you say everything. I haven't heard you say that one
Really?
before. Dog's breakfast.
It's an old one though.
That's funny.
Oh, okay.
Can't we just get a piece of humor around here? So, okay, yeah. So that also good points. Let's just do the last one quick, and then I'm gonna do a summary because my mind has been changing in real time as we've been talking here.
Well,
So
that's what I'm saying. A list like this.
Great.
So this is what I don't like about taking like some of these courses. Like like at least with nutrition, right? You take your nutrition course, and we can say that the number one list of foods that you need to eat, proven fact, is protein. If you don't have protein, your body doesn't, right? So that is number one. When it comes to stuff like this, like there's so many moving parts, right? It's like it's
You're doing it on purpose now.
I did it on purpose.
Yeah. Were you okay? Just side tangent, just for my own benefit.
Yeah.
Were you like this when you were a kid, like since day one, or did you
Wow.
develop the?
We had three absolutely insane. Like me and my two brothers were absolutely insane. My uncles were hilarious. Grew up in a dressing room. I loved guys that had one-liners. Plus, when I was like 12, my aunt was almost married to Butch Baby, who is, I consider him my uncle, who played in. He was a third-round pick to the Cleveland Barons when they were in the NHL. Played New York and. No, sorry, he played in Quebec a little bit in Minnesota, and then in the American League forever, and then in Europe and Switzerland for a few years. So I was able. Him and his friends like Mike Foligno and Ron Duguay and all those kind of guys. Every now and then I would be able to skate with them, and I used to sit there. You know, Bucky Bellin when I ran hockey schools. All these guys. I used to just sit there and listen to the stories, and then any one liner, it would just lock in. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I grew up in a dressing room basically my whole life, like that kid over there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but was it like right
funny.
away? Like you're 12, you're already dropping one-liners, or was it as you got older you started to be funny guy?
I was able to articulate it later. Yeah, I was too shy early. I just I love humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last one, that was just for my own info. So last one we had both of us put down motivation or being a motivator. Okay, why last?
Because like first of all, you and I have the same answer. I know that to me, I don't think there's a such thing as being motivated. Like maybe not such a thing as motivated, but I think motivation is a very fleeting thing. It lasts for. It can help. It can help. You can have someone like push the right buttons at certain times to motivate. That's fine, but a lot of times a motivational speech or a motivator is just it could be fake, it could be just pretend, it could be just words, it could not mean anything. The guy that's doing the motivating might have just read a quote and it means absolutely nothing, and you might be a guy that doesn't need that. For me, honestly, motivation comes from within. It comes from within, period. You're either motivated or you're not. You're gonna and you either, like when you're playing hockey, you have to do the job or you don't. Like that's really the thing. If you're motivated to do that, that's awesome, right? And if you have a coach that knows how to get a team maybe dialed in for a little bit, that's great. So you can give the greatest motivational speech before a game, and then once you start playing, you're not remembering that speech, right? You have energy. It could give you a little bit of zip for a small period of time, and I just don't think it's as a coach. But now, don't get me wrong. I think it's better that you can, like, where I think motivation is very, very healthy. Well, first of all, I think it's better that you have a guy that is motivated, right? And can communicate a message to get guys like on the right path, get the energy up. But I think the best motivation you can have is more like a communication. So like the ability to see you walking in and know the right things to say or how to push the right buttons. So the motivation for you one day might be you're on a 10-game goal streak, and I have the ability to tell you like you're playing great hockey. Continue to do this, this, and this, and the reason you're getting this is because of this, this, and this. Keep it up. Give me a high five, whatever. That's motivating to a bit because you have some validation, right? But at the end of the day, you have to be. It doesn't come from me for you to get motivated. Get yourself out of bed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
you've had this where you ever have a day where you're just like, you know what, like life right now just this ain't good, this ain't good, this ain't good, and and you say something like, I'm gonna quit or whatever, and someone says, "Oh yeah, but you have all the best qualities. You're a handsome fella. You're this.
Yeah.
You're that. You you live in Canada. You have 3 square meals a day. All this shit, and then you're supposed to feel good about yourself. It's like but I don't want to hear about how lucky I am, right? Because it's not motivating right now. But is that another funny thing? Is it?
You're a handsome fella.
Well, no, that's my wife did it to me last night.
Why was that the first thing? You're a handsome
Well,
fella.
because we're going to build you up again, right? And we're going to show you all your good qualities in life. So my wife did it to me last night because I walked out. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I got a whole lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
I just want it to be done.
Yeah.
I just want it to be done.
Yeah.
I'm just I got like a 500-pound gorilla on my back right now. And I walked outside. She goes, "Oh, you're going to sit out in here and talk?" I said, "Oh, it's too hot." So she's like, said something. I said, "Just you know what? I want this done. I want it done. I'm pissed off. Don't even want to be here right now. Like I just like shoot me."
Yeah.
So she started that. Well, think of all the wonderful things you have right now. I'm like, yeah. Okay, great, wonderful, and it's right. It's true, but I'm not motivated by it right now. Okay?
Yeah,
I want my shit done. I want my shit done.
Yeah.
That's it. That's for everybody. I'm in a bad mood. What?
3 square meals a day.
I get 3 square meals a day. Yeah.
Live in Canada.
Live in Canada.
So positive.
Yeah.
Fuck. Oh,
you got clean water.
Oh.
Yeah. I am fortunate that that's there.
Yeah,
I really
true,
am. Yeah.
True.
Anyways.
So nonetheless, that aside, I would agree. I think the man, the motivating thing is like exact same answers as you're giving. I think it's better. Again, we're not saying this is what I would hope doesn't happen from this episode. We're not saying these things are not important. It's I'm forcing you to rank order them. But for people that are paying attention, we're saying if we have to order them one over the other. But it's still better, obviously, if you have a guy that can get that little bit of jam out of the kids for those short bursts. Like that's definitely better, or your team or whatever. And there's different ways of doing it, which I think is important too. Like for me, I'm not the start yelling and screaming and get hyped that way. I'm more what you said. Like this is good, this is good, this is good. I hope that inspires you to keep doing what you're doing. That's the way that I go about it. So there's different ways to do that. But it is still important. It's not like you don't want to have that. But if I have to pick, I have to pick. So in my I guess my summary, I still have for me like I think everything stems from being a good communicator as a coach, as a leader, as a teacher, as a whatever thing. But then just from talking to you over this podcast now, there's definitely exceptions to that where you could give me a coach that never says anything to anybody, but he just knows how to push the buttons and turn the right dials to get the outcomes that he wants, where guys would say, yeah, he didn't say much, but he was my favorite coach or whatever, and same thing with teachers that you have or anything like that. So there's definitely exceptions to that. But for me, I think that communicator piece, I'm going to say the vast majority of the time for me, everything kind of stems from that. If you're able to articulate the message that you want clearly and use the right terminology and all this stuff, then leading your tactical knowledge, motivating, teaching, all that stuff is easier if you can branch from that communication piece.
I like communication.
Yeah,
too.
which is why I still keep that as number one. But definitely from talking to you now, I definitely acknowledge that there's exceptions where that might not necessarily be the number one thing in every single situation. Though I bias towards that personally.
Well, Charlie had a coach, and it was not a lot of words, not a lot of emotion, more gruff than anything. Great coach for a long time, right? It's like so my son has, I think there's 5 words. That's all he ever hears, and I'm not going to say them because I don't. You do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So at first, because that communication skill is not great. It's just direct and it's 5 words. But honestly, it's everything. If you listen to the 5 words, you do this, 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 and this, you're a pro. Don't do this, you're not a pro. So that's all he ever says. And it's not when like, let's say, I can imagine, I've heard this through him too, is like when it's a system, it's like, it's this. It's not like this because it's like, it's this. And if you don't do this, you don't play or whatever. So the communication is short, sweet, not sweet, but short, and just do it.
Yeah. Right.
Works.
Yeah, for sure.
Works. Might not like it as much. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say,
but then he has the ability when he sees the room or the team needs a kick or a big hug, he can get in the room and say, okay, tell a story, and everyone's like, okay, he cares about us. And
yeah, and I think I don't want my own. Again, just through the course of having this conversation, I don't want my own bias where I appreciate communication a lot. Like that's one of my highest values. I don't want that to cloud my judgment where I'll say, well, it never works unless you're a good communicator, because it can work, right? That's an example where I'm the guy that, as you can tell from this podcast, I can talk the feet right onto a fish, like you'd say, give a woodpecker a headache, as you'd say. So I acknowledge that I'm like that because I want to talk, I want to explain, I want to get to the bottom of things, I want to make sure everything's clear. Not everybody's like that, and sometimes it works. Like if I talk to my brother, for example, he's doesn't want the details. Like he's like, get to the point and let's move on. So I could take 15 minutes to tell a story that he'll tell in 48 seconds, and that's just his style. Yeah, sometimes it's better, right? So it's definitely not a one size fits all, but I thought that's kind of what one of the key things. There's a bunch of things I took away from the weekend, but that was one of I thought was an interesting discussion because I rank ordered mine and then I looked at theirs and it wasn't the same. And I was looking at some of the guys around me and it wasn't the same. Everybody was like all over the map with what they kind of thought.
Well, that says that a lot about the course, right? It's like for you that's important. For me, that's not.
Yeah.
So as a coach, you got to be like a cockroach. You got to be adaptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Talking to other people, it's not all the same person.
And well, that's one thing I will credit them for the weekend is most of the conversations they had, which on the one hand was not helpful, but on the other hand it was helpful. Is they were just saying like you got to figure out what you care about.
Yeah.
And then you can decide from every perspective, from your power play, your D zone, your whatever. What are the values you have as a coach? Yeah. And that'll shape how you structure your team, whatever. So there isn't a one size fits all. So that's all I want to talk about today. Anything else? Good to go?
I got to go to another arena.
Yep, me too. Okay, bye.